How we doing, patrons? It's that time of the month again where I answer a couple quick questions that you tossed my way in the monthly question thread. So let's go ahead and dive right into our first question this month. It's from Paul. Paul wants to know, or rather Paul states, every time the subject of a new physical book comes up, I talk about doing it through Kickstarter, which is true. And he says, this to me is the huge drawback of making them a one-time only opportunity, leaving future fans in the cold. I am wondering why you are opposed to the traditional route of publishing books and making them available through your store or selling them through Amazon. And as far as your follow-up, Paul, I mean, absolutely don't worry about, if you're unclear on something, feel free to ask me. I have no problem clarifying, even if it's something I've discussed before, but this actually is not something I have specifically discussed. So let me take a minute and sort of explain, my view on that, which is that running a Kickstarter campaign, or rather publishing a book as a result of a Kickstarter campaign, is not necessarily making it a one-time opportunity. What makes a particular book run limited has to do with factors like how many I print, how difficult it is to print, and whether I'm willing to print again if we ever sell out. Kickstarter functions solely as a method of raising the initial capital that I need to have the book printed, in a manner that if we didn't reach our goal, nobody's on the hook for any money. Like, where if I took standard pre-orders and I couldn't bring in enough to, get the book printed, I would then have to manually refund everybody's pre-order because I wouldn't be able to deliver a product. Kickstarter or other similar crowdfunding platforms basically work on the promise that if we meet our goal, it's funded and then everybody chips in their amount. But if the goal isn't met, everybody gets to just walk away. And then I have the choice of coming up with a different plan, altering my specifications for the book in a way that might make it easier to reach the goal, or lowering the goal amount, or that sort of thing. But nothing about running or funding a book through Kickstarter necessarily means that it won't be available in the future. Case in point, the Control-Alt-Delete 1.0 box set, I always set out with that intending to be a very limited set in terms of I'm going to print a certain amount and that's all I'm ever going to print, for a variety of reasons. The primary one being it was a very big book and a book set, very expensive, and I will never raise that much money again to reprint it. However, once we finished that campaign, I had enough of those books printed to cover the orders we had, plus a little bit extra, to account for books that got lost in the mail or damaged or other unforeseen circumstances like that. Those leftover books, as evidenced by the fact that I still have some of them to sell, have lasted, a year past, when we shipped all of the Kickstarter orders. So while I won't necessarily print that set again, it's obviously been available to customers past that original 30-day Kickstarter campaign. And that will 100% be the case with any future books that I print, with the one exception that rather than just printing a small quantity of extra copies, I will be attempting to print enough extra copies with the intention of having it in stock for a following handful of years. So again, just to just to simplify that, the giant Control-Alt-Delete box set, by its nature, sort of had to be limited. It's a huge book. It's heavy. It takes up a lot of space to store in the warehouse, which I am constantly paying storage on to have those copies there, which is one of the reasons you see me trying to sell them, because I'm paying to keep those, those pallets stored in the warehouse, and I would like to just have them gone. However, future books won't necessarily be that big. They'll be smaller volumes because I'll try to keep up on them, more regularly rather than waiting 10 years to put out some huge set. And the benefit of that is that smaller books take up less space, so in the same amount of space that a pallet of Control-Delete box sets takes up, I could fit quite a larger number of smaller books in that same space, with the intention of having them in stock for 3, 4, 5 years after we run the Kickstarter campaign. So like I said, the Kickstarter campaign is just an easy way for me to gauge whether or not interest actually exists to justify printing these books. And then, eventually when they sell out, because, I will print a finite number of copies, eventually when they sold out, I could then at that point see if there existed enough demand to warrant a second printing. And barring that, they would always be available in digital format. So the 1.0, that big 3-volume collector set, that was the only the only book set that I intended to be sort of like a, get on board with it now or forever hold your peace. I'm not ever printing that again, just because of the logistics involved and the cost and the size of it. But the smaller books I fully intend to try and make available and keep available, not only through the the Kickstarter fulfillment, but down the line as well. So I hope that I hope that kind of like clarifies that, clears that up for you, and you can understand where I'm coming from with wanting to use Kickstarter, for that, just for the funding portion of that. All right, next, Edward Cullum asked, is there any plans to create another Winter Eames Games Brawl like you had with the original comics? I guess that depends on how you define plans. So there are no concrete plans to do so, like in terms of I have not sat down and come up with a plot outline for another Games Brawl, or like characters that would be involved in that, or any kind of specific timeline that I'm aiming for. But with that said, it is something that I would like to someday do again. I have specifically name-dropped the Games Brawl in our new Ethan and Lucas continuity. So Winter Eames is a thing that exists in the Analog and D-Pad universe. Ethan is not necessarily like the originator of it in this new continuity, but it does exist, and the Games Brawl is a tradition that exists on a yearly basis within that universe. So the opportunity exists for me to tell a story, another Games Brawl story within that universe, both with brand new characters as sort of a standalone event, or even potentially having Ethan or Lucas drafted into the Games Brawl in a similar fashion as last time, competing to potentially be the king of Winter Eames for a year, if they can capture that crown. So it's definitely something that I would like to explore. It's definitely something that I think I can say I will do at some point, but it's not something I can say I have any sort of definitive plans to that effect that I could share with you, or any details that I could give you about when that might happen. And I think that if I did, I think that if I tried to tell you like I'm gonna aim to do it like next January, I'm just setting us up, setting both of us up for disappointment. So I'd rather just leave it with yes, I'm on the same page as that being something that I want to try and do again in the future. And finally this month, Zero Care wanted to know, what is one of the craziest things to ever happen to one of your D&D characters? Which I kind of gave it some thought, and that was actually a tougher question than I imagined it would be. Mostly because, unfortunately, I haven't played a tabletop RPG in quite a few years at this point. It's just not something that I can fit in these days. So I was trying to, sort through some of my memories, and pick out some of the stuff that I remembered. And so I don't know if this one is necessarily the craziest or the funniest that I've ever experienced, but I can tell you it is one that sort of stands out in my mind, one that I've always remembered. So we were all doing a little bit of drinking at the table, and we were in a cave, like in this network of caves, and I don't even remember at this point what we were doing in there, but we got ourselves into a situation where we were kind of trapped in this room. And as I seem to recall in hindsight, we were told later on that there was a more intricate solution to get out of this room, but I had been rolling really well with the barbarian that I was playing all night long. I'd been having just uncannily successful rolls, and so we were all feeling a little bit cocky with that, and we decided that the barbarian would just try to break through one of the walls of the cave. I think it must have looked like it was weaker than the other ones or something like that, and so we decided to just break our way out of this cave. which of course started a cave-in as I, broke through this structurally supporting wall. And then again, because my rolls were flawless all night, and being the hero, I decided that the barbarian would be the one to hold up this passageway that was collapsing in on us as the rest of the party, made their way through. And of course, just as everybody passed underneath, I rolled a natural 1 and everything, and failed the strength check, and everything just kind of like collapsed right on top of us. Which was par for the course for not only the way we'd been playing that evening, but I think the way we'd kind of approached that entire 2-day gaming session. And it's also one of the few that I remember that I'm fairly certain I won't ever use as inspiration for a campaign storyline. So I felt free to kind of share that, without being concerned about potential spoilers or giving away something you might see in the comic in the future. But anyway, that is all of our questions for this month. So, again, keep an eye out for the next question thread, and, anything you want to know, just ask.